Portland, Oregon, 3:47 a.m. A traffic camera captured a strange image. A bus on Route 13 driving in the wrong direction, without headlights, no license plate, and no driver. But what chilled the technicians reviewing the footage wasn't the driverless bus. It was the fact that there were shadowy figures inside. Faint, quiet figures sitting in rows like real passengers. 3 hours later, police found a homeless man unconscious near the tram tracks, clutching something no one could explain. A decayed bus ticket, labeled Route 13, dated November 1976. From then on, rumors began to spread about a bus that had no destination, about those who had seen it and were never the same afterward. It's said, only those who are lost, who long to return to the past, can see it. The next was June Rivera, and she had no idea. June Rivera was a final-year architecture student, living alone in a shabby boarding house near an abandoned rail yard. She often stayed up all night sketching designs of structures that didn't exist, but where they came from, she didn't know. One night, while researching for her thesis on post-war urban space transformation, she stumbled upon an old newspaper from 1976. A small headline at the bottom of the page caught her eye. Bus Route 13 disappeared along with 27 passengers. The vehicle was never found. Stranger still, the route map in the article matched exactly the sketch she had just drawn that afternoon, even though she had never seen that map before. From then, June became obsessed. She went to the city library and searched through all the old records, but anything related to Route 13 had been removed. In a storage book, someone had left an anonymous handwritten note. Want to meet Route 13? Don't search, let it find you. 2 days later, at exactly 3 a.m., June was awakened by a strange sound, the soft rolling of wheels on pavement, mixed with the ring of an old bus bell echoing in the wind. She opened her window and looked outside, but the street was completely empty. However, when she turned back, she found a hand-drawn map slipped under the door. A map marked in red, showing a former bus stop that had been demolished since 1981. At the bottom of the map was a scrawled note, only once, 313, don't be late. June brought the map and went to the exact location, now nothing more than an empty lot, shrouded in mist and overgrown with wild weeds. 313. A faint screech sounded, like the brakes of a distant bus. And then, from within the fog, bus number 13 emerged. No headlights, no driver, but the doors opened very slowly, as if someone was still operating them. No one inside looked at her, but the golden light pouring out from the bus gave the feeling of being silently called by name. June stepped on. The moment she entered, the doors shut behind her. The bus started rolling without anyone driving. Through the misted windows, she saw the world outside begin to reverse, time winding back, from autumn to summer, then to the 1990s, then the 1980s. Street lamps and signs changed as decades fell away. Above, the old PA system crackled with vintage music, then a distorted voice announced, Route 13 departing. Passengers, please remain seated and keep your memories stable. But what chilled her most was the rearview mirror before the driver's seat. In it, every single passenger was looking straight at her, with black, soulless eyes. The bus turned onto a road with no name. Outside the window was no longer a city, but a stream of blurred memories, an abandoned train station, an empty classroom, a half-burnt hospital, and finally, a bridge where a little girl stood shivering in the rain. Each scene made June shiver, because she had seen them all in dreams. She screamed, demanding the bus stop, but the voice echoed from the speaker, memory incomplete, journey cannot end. She turned to a nearby passenger and placed her hand on their shoulder. The body was ice cold, but as soon as she touched it, a flood of images rushed into her mind. A young woman curled up in a flooded apartment, eyes wide open, unmoving. No doubt remained. Each passenger was a piece of dead memory, a disappearance, a death left unspoken. June sprang to her feet, trying to force the door open, but it was locked tight. Each time she tugged at it, the bus speaker calmly repeated, "Please, do not exit the vehicle while memory retrieval is in progress." Suddenly, a passenger collapsed in the back. But instead of blood, memory poured out onto the floor, a scene of a little boy abandoned in a park, screaming for help. June stumbled backward, slamming into a seat, and felt herself dissolving, as if the bus was siphoning her own forgotten memories. At that moment, the rearview mirror cracked, and in the fragments, she saw her younger face, sitting quietly on this very bus. The truth began to reveal itself in the strangest way, not from the outside, but from within June herself. The bus, somehow, had unlocked memories she had never recalled, or rather, ones she had once rejected. Fragmented images surged in, a massive fire, people screaming, a dark alley where a hand pulled her away, and a waiting bus. June slumped into the seat, hands gripping the cold iron frame. Each passenger on the bus began to fade, then vanished like candles being blown out. She was the only one left. Outside the window, the scenery changed completely. No longer surreal visions, but a quiet suburban road. A small house appeared. June recognized it, her childhood home, where her mother had died in a fire, officially recorded as caused by faulty wiring. But what she had never told anyone was that she had caused the fire. The bus slowly stopped in front of the house. The door opened. No one called, no one waited. But inside the house, June saw herself, at 9 years old, clutching a teddy bear, crying amid the smoke. She couldn't remember ever coming back, didn't remember being saved. But if she was here, who pulled her from the fire? June stood in a blinding white space where every sound seemed to be swallowed. In front of her was a row of seats. The same passengers from the bus sat there, unmoving. A microphone fell from the ceiling and lit up. A voice rang out, clear now, no longer distorted. Passenger number 44, June Rivera. Crime, denial of memory, disruption of soul flow, choice, continue the journey or replace another. From behind, a child stepped out, the 9-year-old girl from her memory. Her face was sad. The girl placed a bus ticket on the ground, then disappeared. In the distance, the bus door opened, glowing bright. June understood. She bent down, picked up the ticket. The room dissolved. Only she and the bus remained. The bus surged into the darkness. No road, no time, just streaks of white light tearing through space. June sat in the front seat, gripping the ticket. She didn't know where she was going, but she was no longer afraid. In the rearview mirror, her face began to settle. No longer panicked, but calm with acceptance. Beside her, one empty seat. Then suddenly, a new passenger appeared, an elderly man with a familiar gaze. He nodded at her. No one spoke, but she understood. He too was remembering something long forgotten. 3:13 a.m. An abandoned bus stop in the middle of a forest emerged. The bus stopped. No one got off. A year later, bus number 13 was seen again in another city. Still driverless, still full of passengers facing backward, still one empty seat, waiting for the next person. The cycle continues. On a late evening, as the streetlights dimly lit the dark, quiet night, Maria, a woman living in Texas, slowly boarded the last bus of the day. The sun had long set, and the surroundings gradually faded into darkness. She felt exhausted after a long day's work, and only wanted to get home to rest. Her home was located in a quiet suburban area, and this bus was the only one running through the night, passing through desolate streets with not many people around. As Maria boarded the bus, there were only a few passengers sitting in the empty seats, all silent, like ghosts sinking into sleep. She sat down by the window, gazing outside at the quiet streets. Although this was a route she had taken many times, tonight, there was a strange feeling that enveloped her. The empty streets, with no one in sight, and only the steady hum of the bus engine as her companion. The atmosphere inside the bus became heavy, and the silence felt too intense. A sense of unease began to creep into Maria's mind, as if something was wrong. Though she wasn't one to get easily bothered, tonight, there was something about the situation that unsettled her. The dim streetlights cast flickering reflections on the window. The darkness outside seemed to merge with the bus, and the feeling of waiting for something unexpected to happen lingered, though she couldn't pinpoint what it was. The bus began moving, and Maria quietly observed the scenery outside, but her mind was filled with strange thoughts. The bus had left the city center and was now moving through even more desolate areas, with no sign of life. Suddenly, the sense of unease within her grew stronger as the late night took over, and the streets seemed emptier than ever. She couldn't explain why, but the excessive stillness made her feel like something invisible was watching, silently following her every move. A middle-aged man entered the bus. He didn't say anything, just quietly sat next to Maria. She glanced at him from the corner of her eye, noticing that he had no luggage, didn't wear anything special, and seemed out of place in this quiet space. She tried to focus on her phone, but his gaze remained fixed on her, even though she didn't look directly at him. Maria began to feel uncomfortable. She subtly shifted her body away, but he remained too close, and his presence made the air feel heavier. She looked out the window, but the darkness outside only made the loneliness feel more intense. She tried to dismiss this strange feeling, but it kept growing stronger. It didn't feel like the unfamiliarity of a night ride, but rather an invisible threat. When Maria glanced at him again, she noticed that his eyes were still fixed on her, but there was no specific attention in his gaze, only a vacant, mysterious look. He didn't speak a word, but his presence felt like an invisible force pressing down on her. Maria felt as though she was being watched, and the unexplainable sensation filled her, making everything around her seem heavy and ominous. After a moment of silence, the man began to speak. Despite her attempt to focus on other thoughts, Maria couldn't help but overhear his strange words. The stories he shared seemed completely unrelated to the current situation and only became more bizarre as time passed. He spoke about deaths in the past, about people who had passed away without any clear connection to those around. Maria began to feel that something was wrong. She tried to look out the window, avoiding eye contact with the man, but his words echoed in her mind like an inescapable sound. He continued speaking about deaths and said, "They're still around here." Maria didn't understand who he was talking about, but a strange and unsettling feeling was rising inside her. His words were unclear, incoherent, yet they carried a haunting presence that defied explanation. Suddenly, Maria sensed a shift in the air around her. She couldn't explain why, but a sudden chill engulfed the space. The lights inside the bus seemed to dim, and everything became blurry and surreal. She tried to focus her eyes, but all she could see was darkness. She looked out the window and felt as if everything was distorting. The air grew thick and heavy, as though some invisible force was pressing down on everything around her. She turned to look at the man and suddenly noticed something incredibly strange. He had no face. The basic features of his face were gone. It was just a blurred area, impossible to make out. Maria turned away in horror, her chest tightening with an indescribable sense of dread. When she looked back, the man was gone. The seat beside her was completely empty, without a trace. She stared at the empty seat, her eyes locked on it as if hoping something might change. The space around her felt eerily silent, and even the usual hum of the bus seemed swallowed by the darkness. She gasped for air, trying to convince herself this was all just a hallucination, a symptom of fatigue from long work hours. But the strange feeling wouldn't go away. Looking around, she saw no one, only vast darkness surrounding her, and the flickering bus lights cast weak streaks through the night. Maria couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her, an invisible presence hiding within the shadows. The next day, when Maria woke up, the strange events from the night before kept replaying in her mind. She still couldn't forget the image of the man and the bizarre things he had said. Although she tried not to think about it, the lingering unease clung to her, as though some unseen presence continued to follow her throughout the day. As Maria walked into her office, she tried to stay composed and focus on her work, but the man's stories kept returning to her, the strange details refusing to let go of her mind. Suddenly, her phone rang, startling her. This time, it was her best friend calling, and her voice sounded more serious than ever before. Her friend informed her that the man she met on the bus last night had died in a bus accident years ago on the exact same road Maria traveled every day. Maria felt a chill crawl down her spine, and her hands began to tremble. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. Those strange events were no longer coincidences, but something inexplicable. She realized that maybe it had all been a hallucination, or maybe something truly supernatural had occurred that night, something she couldn't understand. Each night, when darkness fell, Maria couldn't escape the sense that someone was still watching her from the shadows. The only question she couldn't answer was whether it had been a coincidence, or a wandering soul that had never found peace, still haunting that same bus route, searching for a release that would never come. The bus ride had become a part of her memory she could never forget, whether what she saw was just a strange illusion or something much deeper, beyond human understanding. Every year, on November 14th, a mysterious bus appears precisely at 2:17 a.m. in an abandoned industrial zone on the southern edge of Seattle. The bus has no license plate, its headlights are dim, and its exterior is coated in a layer of dust, as if it had just crawled out of the ground. No one has ever seen a driver, but the door always opens on its own, and the lights inside switch on automatically. The most terrifying part, someone always boards the bus and never returns. City surveillance cameras captured the clearest footage last year. Derek Lynn, 17 years old, a high school senior, left his house at 2 a.m. He carried his phone, wallet, and a can of energy drink. The camera showed Derek standing alone at a desolate bus stop. Then, headlights flared through the fog. The bus door opened. Derek stepped inside. That was the last time he ever appeared in any known human record. No phone signal, no GPS, no body, no explanation. Derek's family later fell into crisis, but when investigators reviewed the footage, they discovered something even more terrifying. Since 2012, every year at the exact same time, at the same location, someone disappears, and always with the same type of bus. They called it Route Zero, but no one, not even supernatural chasers, dared go near it. Route Zero was once part of a city-run transit experiment launched in autumn 2011. The idea was to create an overnight bus line for third-shift workers at the southern industrial zone. The first bus began operating on the exact date, November 14th that year, but on its inaugural night, the vehicle with route code T070 vanished from the GPS system just 22 minutes into service. When the rescue team located the bus the next morning, it was parked silently inside an old underground tunnel closed off since the 1960s. No one could explain how it got in. The tunnel entrance had been sealed with concrete and showed no signs of tampering. Inside the bus, completely empty, no passengers, no driver. But strangely, the engine was still warm, and the lights were still on. The incident was covered up from the public. The city quietly canceled the project, citing a technical failure. But the drivers and technicians involved, several disappeared in the weeks that followed. One committed suicide, and two relocated out of state without a word. From that point on, no one spoke of Route Zero again, until it returned the following year, on the same date. And the disappearances began. Erin was the only one who didn't give up after Derek vanished. They were close classmates, and she had heard him speak of recurring dreams involving an old bus. She started digging, researching missing persons cases, reviewing old accident reports, and finally came across one cryptic term, Route Zero. On November 14th of this year, exactly 2 a.m., Erin quietly left her house. She brought a flashlight, a fully charged phone, and a voice recorder. She went straight to the same stop where the camera had last seen Derek boarding the bus. Fog blanketed the industrial zone. The streetlights were off. Not a single car. Not a sound. 2:16. A sudden gust of cold wind blew through. The air seemed to suck itself out of the world. Erin stood frozen. 2:17. Headlights pierced through the fog. No engine sound. The bus looked like it came straight out of the 1970s. Faded paint, peeling metal, and dim cabin lights like flickering candles. The sign above the windshield read Route Zero, but the letters blinked erratically as if the circuitry were glitching. The door opened. No one got off. But inside, people were clearly seated, all of them with their backs turned to her. Erin stepped on, and the door slammed shut behind her. The air inside the bus felt suffocating, as if being compressed by an invisible force. Erin could no longer hear the wind, her phone, or even her own heartbeat. There was only a thick, oppressive silence, as dense as water. She stepped toward the middle of the bus, the place with the dimmest light, trying to call out, "Is anyone here?" No response. But from the overhead rearview mirror, she could clearly see. Every passenger had a pale, lifeless face, hollow black sockets, and no mouth. No one moved, yet all of them were staring at her through the mirror. Suddenly, the bus shook slightly. There was no driver, but the steering wheel turned on its own, the gears shifted, and the wheels began to roll. The bus sped off into the night, following no known route. Outside the window, Seattle was no longer there. Erin saw herself passing through twisted scenes, a pitch-dark hospital corridor with bloodstains, a flooded tunnel, a room full of wires plugged into human bodies. Each time she looked out, the scenery changed again. Always places soaked in death, buried memories, and unnamed pain. Erin realized the bus wasn't taking her anywhere. It was taking her through the deaths of souls still trapped. Then she started to understand. The bus was a kind of memory recorder. Each passenger represented an unsolved missing person case. When she placed her hand on the back of the seat, where a girl in a black hoodie sat, the scene changed instantly. She was transported to the moment that girl died, a park attack the killer never caught. She continued touching other seats. Each time, she lived another death. A gas leak suffocation, someone falling from a tall building, someone buried alive. Every death tore at her sanity, every soul, a wordless grief. Finally, she reached the last row and saw Derek. He sat still, hands on his thighs, face somber. When she called his name, Derek looked up. His eyes were pitch black and bottomless, and he spoke in his exact voice. "Erin, you finally came." That voice didn't come from a living person. It was cold as metal, flat like a recording. But what paralyzed Erin wasn't the sound. It was the next words. "Your real name is Evelyn. Do you remember?" Erin froze. That name. She thought she had buried it. Evelyn, her name before the family moved, after an incident no one ever talked about. But how could Derek, or whatever was wearing Derek's face, know that? The bus lights suddenly turned red. The entire bus tilted like it had taken a sharp turn. But no one fell, no one reacted. The passengers sat still, blank-eyed, staring straight ahead. Derek stood, but didn't walk. He raised his hand, and a black mist streamed from his body, swirling into a vague, human figure behind him. Erin trembled. She looked around. The passengers were now turning their heads, their faces warped, cracked like shattered plaster statues. A voice echoed from the bus speaker, not from any driver, but from deep within the system. Soul identified, code 44. Vacancy replaced, cycle complete. Erin screamed, but her legs couldn't move. The floor of the bus turned soft like a swamp, pulling her down. The lights went out, and the bus vanished into the mist. 3 days later, Erin woke up in a strange room, still clutching a wrinkled bus ticket, Route 0. No one remembered she was ever gone, but from that night on, she heard the sound of the bus every time she closed her eyes. And in the mirror, her face had started to change. On November 14th, the following year, the bus returned. The door opened. Someone else stepped on. The cycle continues.